and welcome to teachersfortomorrow.net. Tonight we're joined by some friends down in Murray, Kentucky. You guys want to say a quick hello?
Hey, my name is Mike Chipman. I'm a biology teacher at Murray High School.
Go ahead, Heath.
Hello, my name's Heath Walls, and I'm an assistant principal at the high school that Mr. Chipman works at.
Well, sweet. So first we have to say Mike Pennington's not going to be able to make it tonight. He got stuck at a kid function this evening, so he won't make it. But tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the flipped classroom and how the flipped classroom works. And so we're going to start with Heath, Mr. Walls, ask you to talk a little bit about why you wanted to get flip in your building and how we got together and what happened from there.
All right. Well, one of the big things that I think many schools face is making sure their students are engaged and eager to learn whatever content it is in classroom. And so in doing that, one of the things that we looked at was, what can you do in the classroom as a teacher to get the attention of a student? So flipped classroom was one of those tools that we thought we would be interested in using, and then of course we were able to get a hold of you, Mr. Holman, and because of some of the work that you had done in the past, and so we thought we would give it a shot, and I think it's turned out to be pretty well. And of course Michael can speak more on that as he's incorporated some of this stuff into his classroom over the last few weeks.
Well, Michael, you wanna get rolling? I guess I was in Murray about the first week of April, I think, is when I was down there for a couple days. So why don't you talk a little bit about how you're using the flip, what you perceive the flip as being, and how you're trying to pull that off in your biology classroom.
Sure. I guess as far as what I perceive it to be is just, and what I've kind of gathered from doing it and seeing it is allowing the students to kind of be at their own pace and learn their own way. And what I've seen is I have students in all types of abilities and learning styles, I guess. And some of the things that I've done to kind of drag those out of the students, and I guess I should probably share my screen here and show you guys. One of the things that I've really found interesting is this website called Blend Space, and what it's helped me to do is like put all of my lessons together in one place. And like I'll show you an example. You can see here like the number of views that some of the stuff has got. And so this is a lesson that I did I guess beginning of last week. And what I've put here is everything that they need to do this particular lesson. Here I started the unit with, this is like all the learning targets, and for this unit and all the vocab, I give the students the vocab as a way to kind of familiarize them with the words. I don't ask them to look them up or anything like that, but it is just some of the students really appreciate that, while there's others could care less. And then you just kind of use this to work through. So here's a video of me teaching, and some of the students really love that. And one of the ways that I started doing this, see if it'll pull up this document here. May have to do it, figure it out another way here, but that's fine. Is I've been giving them outlines to basically pre-teach my material. And so here's an example of this. This one looks incomplete. It's strange, but you can get the idea. And so they basically ask some questions about, all right, so these are the things I'm going to be teaching, and some of the students will then go and take that outline and use their book, and others will watch the videos. And I've just seen all different styles. Some of them wait till I teach it and then actually use it and do it that way. And I've had some students that will actually in classroom while I'm teaching will have their phone out and their headphones in, listening to the video of me teaching and working on that outline at their own pace.
Now,
And
I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Does that bug you when they do that?
no, and I guess I've been a little different in that regard. One of my philosophies with the students is this is your grade. This is your opportunity to do well in my class. If your choice is to, be on your phone or whatever you want to do during that time, then I can't stop that. I could spend most of my time policing the fact that they're not paying attention to me, or they are, or whatever. But I've chosen not to do that. And the only time that I step in is when they're interrupting the ability of another student to do that. But what's interesting is one of the students who had been a more disruptive student has really taken hold of these videos and outlines, and he'll sit in my classroom. Well, initially, when I first started this, he sat in the back of the classroom, had his headphones in, watching the videos, doing the outlines. But what actually happened just a few days ago, he asked to move to the front of the classroom, which was just astounding to me. Of course, I said, yeah, move up here. And so he says I can't pay attention back there. Whereas before, he asked to move to the back of the classroom so he could not be worried about not paying attention, if that makes sense. And what I saw in him is, whereas his test scores had been low 60s, low 50s even, out of 100, he scored an 88 on the last test. And I can't remember 5 minutes of that previous unit where he was paying really close attention to me. He was just at his own pace, doing his own thing the entire time, and that won me over right there. And then I had the other extreme too. I had the kids who, like, I'll just show you. This is all the videos that I've been making. Been pretty busy.
I would say you've been busy in the last month. There's a lot here.
Yeah, I mean, I had the other extreme of students that, the high intellect, auditory learner types that don't want to spend 20 minutes extra on top of the time that they have to be in my classroom watching this video. They want to hear me say it once, and that's how they learn. They hear me say it once, they're able to process it at a high level, and so this has represented extra work for them. But I've seen their test scores come up too. And so while they probably wouldn't admit, they're happy with a 94 when they should be getting 100. Both are A's, but I've seen their scores come up. I've seen a kid who, should be one of the top in the class, but he impedes himself. He made over 100 on my last exam because he's finally bought into just this simple method of studying. Because for him, he's an auditory learner. He goes home, watches the video one time, he solved the entire unit, and that's good. And so I think, whereas some of the other students, I have some that are, the B's type students that are hard workers that will watch my videos 10, 15 times a piece, and that's how they study. And so, I mean, whatever works. I walk out in the hall and I hear myself talking all the time, and it's kind of funny because they're on their phones listening to the videos, before a test or something like that. And so I look at this as a way to provide multiple avenues for them to learn. I was the kind of student that heard it once, got it, I was done. I don't need to do any work, and I always did my work at the last minute, and I always just did what I could to get by. And so I resonate with those kids that didn't like this. But for the kids that are finally, this is the way they get it, this is the way they want to do school, it's completely, it's a game changer for them. And for me, being able to reach those kids, it was a game changer for me too in that regard.
Well, maybe we should talk a little bit about that when you make this comment that, there's a lot of things going on here. You're showing us tons of work you're doing. But what I remember is when we went into the room the day after we had talked about Flip and what Flip could be, The kids were on Zaptions, and maybe Heath wants to talk about this too. First, all your kids basically have cell phones, so it's a BYOB kind of atmosphere. It's cell phone based for the most part. You had some, what were they called, ThinkPads? Is that
Yep.
right? So
yeah, something like that.
what I'm hearing you talk about is not really flip. What you're talking about is engagement of students in material, regardless of whether they're doing it outside of school or they're doing it in your classroom, which is, I think, the way I kind of tried to present it to you, that flip is not going to work for all kids outside the room, but there's a group of kids that are going to be able to take that material and learn tons. And I think when we were in your room, we asked the question, how many of you want him to live teach this? And how many of you would rather sit and watch this video so you could be in control? And I think a lot of your kids kind of wanted that option to be able to move at their own pace. So we're really talking about moving at your own pace through content and showing mastery. Is that right?
Yeah, and I can see eventually, hopefully after the summer I would have everything available to where a kid could step in my classroom after the first few days of me kind of training them up on the system, maybe in a week or so. Just sitting at home watching the entire first unit, being able to do that. I had one of my honor students whose grade went from a low, she was struggling in the mid B range, and she made a high A on the last test. She said that she finally found a way to study. And she's been bringing her math into my room and working on that. And not that concerned about, because she's been doing biology at home, and so she comes and does math in my room, and again, not offended at all if she's making hundreds on my exams and if she's learning the material. She says for the first time all year she's finally getting it.
Well, that raises another real important question. You're obviously letting go of a lot of control, and you're willing to take that risk to let kids move at their own pace through material.
Right.
What about the teacher who's pretty afraid to do that? What kind of advice would you give to somebody who's like, there's no way I could have kids back in the cell phone while I'm talking? What kind of advice would you give them?
I've thought about this a lot, and I don't take myself that seriously. And I know what I'm talking about, and I know what I know, as far as biology is concerned, and I know that I know more than they do, and that's why they're in my classroom. But I don't take myself so seriously as to believe that I'm the most important thing going on in my classroom. And so, I give them a set of learning targets at the beginning of the unit. I tell them when the test is going to be. How they get from that point to test day is up to them. And so, as long as they're not impeding the learning process of any other student, then if they want to come to my room and do math, that's fine. As long as they come ready to take a test and do well on it. And my AP students, which is a whole other thing, but my AP students come in and half of them are working on something else when they're in my room, and they're listening to me talk about whatever we have to talk about that day, but they're working on other things because I know that I'm one of 6 AP classes that they're taking. I'm not the most important thing in the room. And so I guess my advice to other teachers is don't take yourself so seriously as to impede a student who learns a different way than you do. I can sit and fill up 10 pages of notebook paper during a 5-hour meeting and be able to write a paper about the meeting afterwards. Whereas someone might look at my doodle and say you didn't do a thing and you didn't pay attention to a word that was said. And so I just have a different way of learning. And so I've learned, I think, and I guess my experience outside the classroom has really helped in not coming into, this is only my 3rd year teaching. I'm 37 years old. And so I had some experience coming in, and I learned early that I'm not as important as I think I am sometimes. And so I think that was a helpful thing for me. And I think that's, I don't want to, I don't know, categorize teachers or anything, but I think a lot of teachers are really bothered when a student is working on something else because they feel like they can't let go. and you just need to let go. There's a difference between they're working on something versus they're disrupting the whole class or whatever like that. And most of the time they're doing nothing wrong. They're just doing something on their own at their own pace.
Well, I guess that takes the heat. What do you think about what he just said and what you're hearing? And you're the vice principal of the building. How do you perceive it? And what have you noticed any difference since the last month in the building?
Well, one of the things that, and I'll just kind of touch on this briefly. One of the things that I think was important for any teacher is the fact that the goal is to meet the student where they're at. Mr. Chipman alluded to, students working on other things. And, again, we go back to meeting students where they're at and when they're ready. They weren't ready for biology today because math right now is the most pressing thing, and they know that they can get their biology either through the video or through another a tool, another avenue. The teacher is there, yes. So if they need to, maybe some of them can multitask. Where they're working on math, they hear a concept or see something that's happening now in biology that they need some clarification. They stop doing math and they focus back on biology. And again, that's all. That's what learning is. You learn when you're ready to learn, and you learn, what you need to learn. That's what we all do as we take notes. One of the things that we learned when we first learned how to take notes was what were the main ideas. Well, it's the main idea to you that was going to allow you to grasp the rest of the concept. And so I think this is just another way to allow students to get where they need to go at their pace. And again, one of the biggest challenges for all teachers is the different levels of learning in a classroom. So, you have a very high achieving student, and you have a student that may be in the middle of the road, and then you have a low achieving student traditionally. And it's not that they can't achieve, it's just, are we giving them the right tools and the right roads to travel to get where they need to go at their own pace? And so, again, it's been a great tool. As I've gone by and just kind of peeped in, that's what I noticed. There are kids that are learning at their pace. They're learning, where they're at that time. And so, that's the only, that's what I like. And the key word there is they're learning. I mean, that's the goal. They're learning, and they're getting there at their pace. And so it's been a great tool.
All right, Travis, what do you think about all this? This is a little bit different than I think you expected.
Well, I think that, I guess I had a conversation with my student teacher the other day about what flipped class is, and I feel like typically the idea of flipped class kind of, I don't know that it is usually brought up with these contexts or this context in mind. I feel like this is the right context where students are able to learn at their pace, and flipped classroom doesn't necessarily mean that they have to do the lesson at home. Some kids can do it while they're in study centers. Some can do it in class. Like Mike was saying, they put the headphones in, and essentially, to put it bluntly, and a lack of a better term, I mean, they were ignoring Mike's, his lesson in the front of the room, but they were still getting what they needed to. And for the students who learn audio, it might even be better for them because they can pause, rewind when they feel like they missed something, and if it's an audio cue that helps them, then they're able to do that. And I like the talk about if the students are meeting the students where they're at and so forth. I mean, I was talking to my student teacher the other day, and I was telling him that to some extent, and there are certain limitations on all of these things, but the student is going to learn what they're going to learn, almost regardless of how it's presented. If that student is sitting in the back of the room on his phone, well, he's not going to be paying attention to you. At least if you put something on his phone that he can learn from, he's probably going to listen to that, which in Michael's, his example, I think that point was pretty well proven. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. Is that where you were looking for, Garth? My 2 cents.
I just wondered where you were coming, because I look at it, again, we're back to pace, and then I think the other thing we heard talked about is this idea of constructionism, of allowing kids to build at their own pace and making meaning out of what they're learning. I mean, all people construct their own knowledge. So I think what, Mike, it sounds like what you're doing is you're doing a lesson, but you've got a video recording of that lesson, or you've got other ways of doing it. Maybe you're using Zaption, maybe you're using other things. But the kids are able to find meaning in that content regardless of how it's being presented. And I think back, I just am looking at a survey on my other computer, where I just did a survey with my students and asked them about how they perceived the Middle Age Web Quest, which is built on a similar line as what Mike's doing. You've got certain quests to go through, things to do, but you can do them at your pace. There's recorded lectures. There's me talking sometimes in the room. We got almost 90% of the kids rated at a 4 or 5 on a scale of 1 to 5. You scroll down through, another one I picked out that I thought was rather interesting is, do they feel like they're in control of their own learning? Got 93.6% say they're in control of their own learning. I think Mike's kids would say they're in control of their learning, which is what you ultimately want to give kids the power to do. They become, as Dan Pink talks about, you're giving them autonomy, you're giving them mastery, but you're also giving them purpose. They know what they need to do. They know that there's resources provided and they can get that done. And then the other thing I think is rather interesting is the last thing on mine that I did. First, they always want the visual podcast or the visual, like you're doing the movies with your lecture, the same thing, they want that. But the one that I found kind of interesting, and I think this kind of jives with what we found out in your class, Mike. I asked the kids, do they prefer the computer side chats or would they like a live lecture? And it comes down to, in this case, it was 57% to 44%. So 44% of the kid wanted me to stand up there and talk. They want that lecture. They're the auditory learners. And then, 60% of the kids learn in a different way. And they want to be able to pause, and they want to be able to rewind, and they want to be able to, go throw the paper out in the middle of it if that's what's bothering them at the moment. Mm-hmm. So it sounds to me like what you're really doing is you're using, which I've always thought, Flip, the kids that don't do their homework aren't going to go home and miraculously start watching videos. It's just not, I've never seen that as the way that's going to solve education's problems. But what seems to make more sense is this pacing idea, allowing kids different ways to pace and to learn the material as they move forward. So I guess we'll kind of leave it there. Anybody else have anything to say about that or comments on that?
Go ahead.
I would say, again, from an administrator's viewpoint, one of the nice things about this style of learning or this way to present, again, it offers another way for teachers to enhance the learning environment. And so oftentimes when we have professional developments or we're looking for ways, again, to engage students, to me, this seems to be an awesome way, again, looking at from the eyes of an administrator, especially with new teachers or teachers that may be struggling on reaching all of their students. So, I'm really excited, and, of course, having Mr. Chipman on board and, really being able to let go and really actually be the extreme of this. As we move forward, I'm really excited, and I think it's something that young teachers and maybe teachers that sometimes hit a plateau, this offers another tool to go in their box so that they can, again, continue to reach kids and meet them where they're at.
Go ahead, Mike. You had something else you want to add?
Yeah, well, I was going to, just a couple things. This group of kids that I have now started the beginning of the year where I would lecture to them and they were required to write down their own notes. And so they have gone from that, which is kind of one extreme of the puzzle, to this other place where they have been given so much material. And I still have kids that will come into classroom and write their own notes, but not everyone needs to do that. Not everyone wants to do that. Not everybody can do that. And so I've tried to just basically expound and give everyone just whatever option they can take to learn the material. And so at the beginning of this next school year, I really think that I'm going to see this come to light more than I am now, because the kids are going to have buy-in from the beginning or the ability to do that from the beginning. Whereas these students that I have now have kind of grown with me and my own experience of growing in this, and some of them are a little bit more resistant to that, and so or not resistant, more so just learning slower, I guess, and having a hard time adjusting. And so I think next year I'm going to see some real fruit from this, in that I think that having a new crop of students is really going to help that. And another interesting thing is that our science department recently purchased 2 iPads with the goal of me helping the other 2 science teachers come along on some of these ideas and teaching them how to give materials to their students and help their students to learn on their own and not be so dependent on their teacher's particular way of presenting things. And so I'm looking forward to that as well.
I think one thing that'll be, one thing that I experienced when I first started kind of going through, getting students to own their learning and to be able to go at their own pace and so forth, is that, initially you have the students who say that they want to hear the lesson directly from you because they would tell you that it's because that's what I learned best from. That's how I learned best. Then you'll find out, Mike, probably after, no, that's not true. He doesn't learn best this way. He's just used to he's just used to the same thing, and that's what he wants. It's not that it's what he needs, it's what he wants. And when you start breaking down that wall and start breaking down those preconceived thoughts that the kids have about how they learn, that's when it gets really fun, because you can take some of those kids who you think are like, need to take down the notes, need to write this down, need to write that down, and they don't need to. They just feel like they have to because they've always done it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's when it gets fun.
Well, I keep writing things down and jotting things down, and 2 things maybe. First, I think it's awesome that they got you iPads. I think that's pretty impressive, and I think that is a compliment to you and what you're doing with your students, and that administration sees, whomever it is, whether it's the department or the administration in general, sees some real potential and positive things occurring in your classroom. And I think you're probably a trailblazer in many ways. You certainly were doing some pretty unique things when I first came down there and started talking with you a little bit. The other thing is, I know you've talked to some of the other teachers. There were only a few teachers. I think we had 5 of us in this little PD for 2 days, and it was. I'll describe a little bit about how we did it. It was maybe an hour of me presenting, and then we kind of just sat and talked about what things were, and I gave you the example of Zaption and ThingLink and a couple other things, and I asked you if you would be willing to test them out the next day when you had a sub, and we would go in and take a look at them. So, maybe you could just tell me a little bit about what other teachers are doing, how you're seeing it progress in the building. I know you had said there were other couple teachers that were going to try to join us and just couldn't get it to work out. Maybe we can talk with them some other day. But you talked to them. How do you see it going there?
Well, it's been interesting. There's 2 other teachers. Both of them are history teachers, actually, and both of them teach through a storytelling type method, and they're both really good at what they do and really knowledgeable. And I think one of them has seen his students are kind of resisting a little bit, and I don't know if it's the extra work that they think is required of them, or if it's just the fact that they really enjoy hearing him talk. It seems, just from talking with him and spending some time talking with him this week, it seems like he's on his end. He's doing some of the same things. I think his students may just be a little more resistant, and it could be that his students are older than mine and that they've kind of become accustomed to a certain way of, every school has its own little character, and Murray High is no different. It kind of has its own feel to it, and I think the students kind of get accustomed to that and may be resistant to that change. And I think that's Mr. Shelby, and Coach T is a little. I think he's tried to do some of that, and he's run into some of the problems, I think, where a lot of his students don't have access, and so he's tried to make accommodations with that. He's done just some of it in the room where he's showed them like I think he showed them like a Zaption video in the room and had them work along with that while he was presenting it from the front of the room and did some different things. And so both of them are trying some different things, and I think that's important. And as far as from my standpoint, I think they're doing great. I mean, I haven't heard one way or the other, but I think they've run into a different set of circumstances because they teach older students, and I teach young students, and my students are kind of used to me being a little unconventional anyway, I guess. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but they're kind of used to having a different set of circumstances when they come to my classroom anyway. So this was kind of a, even though they were a little slow to come around, they're starting to really get into it more because they're just used to something different when they come to my room. Whereas, some of the older students may be a little less quick to catch up with it. And interestingly enough, I also teach an AP class, which is seniors and juniors, and like top 5% of the school seniors and juniors. And when I mentioned recording a video to them and having them watch it ahead of time, they like were just couldn't imagine doing that. They want me to teach them, and they want me to answer their questions, and they don't want to watch a video. They don't want. I mean, they just couldn't even imagine doing that. But it's funny because I talked about reviewing for the AP exam that's coming up, and I said I'm going to make some videos because we only have a week 'cause we lost 2 weeks for snow. I'm going to make some videos of me reviewing, and they were all about that. And so I think it's funny that they're being a little inconsistent there, but that's AP kids, I guess.
They want you to tell them what they need to know so they can get the A.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They just exactly what the answer is and how to get the right answer.
Well, I think that I found that too. That typically it's your brightest kids that find this the trickiest to do because they do well in school. So for them, they're like, why are you changing it on me? Why are in a sense it makes them do more work. And there's a lot of Travis put up that quote up there. But there's another one, he who does the most work learns the most. And sometimes when the kids are actually the ones doing the work, they aren't as happy as someone else doing the work for them. And I think you hit a nail on the head, too, with the idea that if you've tried other things, it's going to be easier for you to implement. If I'm not mistaken, you guys have about, 20 days of school left?
Yeah, 19.
Yeah,
19.
So, I mean, you're trying to implement things the last 35, 40 days of school. Kids are pretty accustomed to the way things are going to be in your classroom, so all of a sudden you're changing the procedures. Now, the one thing I think was most interesting, and I think it was Coach, what's his name again? I know it's Scott, but you guys call him Coach what?
Coach T.
Coach T. I think he said the most interesting thing when we were there that day is he said at lunch that one day, he said, it makes me realize that I'm not meeting the needs of all my students. And I think in the end, that's what we maybe can kind of end with is that idea. Are we meeting the needs of all of our students? I think you said it, Mike. There are kids that just need something different. I think Heath was talking about it when you were talking about, different kids learn at different paces and they have priorities and things are important at this moment and biology is not at this particular moment. So are we meeting our kids where they're at and giving them what they need to be successful in the classroom? And I think that's what you're doing, Mike, and I think that's what the two social studies teachers are attempting to do, and maybe they're going to run into some trouble, but if they hang in there and maybe start that way next year with a little mix of this blended, I guess it's called blended learning now, where there's maybe that lecture in class, but there's some things going on outside of class instead of traditional homework, maybe they'll see some great potential from that. Heath, anything you want to say before we go tonight?
No, other than I guess I'll need to get that quote, he who does the most learns the most. I think that may be the, especially for the older kids and the AP kids, that may be kind of the quote to live by because they are typically, the brightest kids, like you said, those kids are the ones that they want to go from point A to point B the quickest, the most streamlined way, and what I've been doing has worked very well. Why change it now? But if we use that quote maybe as a motto to kind of say, it's not about going to point A or to point B the fastest. It's about learning the most. What can we conquer along the way? And so maybe that's a new way to look at it. But again, we have to do that from day one, not day 160 into the school year. It
Well,
makes a
I'm
lot
going to just, since Mike Pennington's not with us tonight, I will share a text he sent me earlier today. We were actually talking about something totally different. And this is right along the lines of what you just said, Heath. He said, maybe we should start thinking about learning as a process and not a destination. We need to begin to look at collaboration, not just group work, and learning because it's just the right thing to do, allowing kids to do what they need to do. I think it's right what you were saying.
Yep.
Who does the most work learns the most.
Exactly.
Mike, anything else you want to share?
No, I appreciate you having me on. It's been good.
Oh wait, I think you cut out. I think you cut out. So if you want to say that again, sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Just you guys have me on. It's been good. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for joining us, and hopefully we can touch back with you maybe after the start of school next year and see how things are rolling along. You know, I do think that you're one of those people that was taking risks and willing to try new things from the beginning. So I hope I was able to add something to it and give you a little bit of insight to maybe have you try some new things.
Yeah, it's been great.
Travis, anything else from you?
Oh, sorry, it was cutting in and out. I'm just going to say that quote that you referred to, and I read it in a book the other day, and it said, when you teach a child something, you take away forever his chance of discovering it for himself. And that just kind of stuck with me. It's kind of marinated in the back of my mind, and you know, I think there's a time and a place for all things, but I think that one's interesting.
All right. Well, I want to thank Heath Walls and Mike Chipman for for joining us from Murray, Kentucky, southwest corner of the state of Kentucky, down pretty close to Memphis, kind of triangular between Memphis and Nashville. It's been a pleasure to talk with you guys, and hopefully we'll get in touch with you again soon. So that's it for teachersfortomorrow.net tonight. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.